freed himself from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead.
Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to seven more days. So during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life.
At the last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to be afraid of death, but one must cut off all attachment to the material body and everything pertaining to it and all desires thereof.
We'll stop here and read the voice. Right, bro? Kim pramatasya bahubhi parokshir hayanerhiya varam muhurtam viditam ghatate shreyase yataha Kim paramattasya bahubhi parokshirhaya nireha varamuhurtam viditam ghatate shreyase yataha. Anyone else would like to chant? Kim pramatasya bahubhi parokshirhaya varamurtam viditam ghatate shreyase yataha. Kim pramatasya bahubhi parokshirhaya nireha Varamuhurtam viditam Ghatate shreyase yataha Kim pramatasya bahubhi Parokshirhaya nireha Varamuhurtam viditam Ghatate shreyase yataha. Kim pramatasya bahubhi parokshirhaya nireha varamuhurtam viditam ghatate shreyase yataha. We can read the word-to-word translation together, please. What is pramatasya of the bewildered? Bahubhi by many, Parokshi inexperienced, Ayane years, Iha in this world, Varam better, Murtam a moment, Viditam conscious, Katate one can try for, Shreyase in the matter of the supreme interest, Yataha by that. Translation. What is the value of a prolonged life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment of full consciousness, because that gives one a start in searching after his supreme interest. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Sukadeva Goswami instructed Maharaj Parikshit about the importance of chanting of the holy name of the Lord by every progressive gentleman. In order to encourage the king, who had only 7 remaining days of life, Srila Sukadeva Goswami asserted that there is no use in living hundreds of years without any knowledge of the problems of life. Better to live for a moment with full consciousness of the supreme interest to be fulfilled. The supreme interest of life is eternal, with full knowledge and bliss. Anyone else would like to continue?
Those who are bewildered by the external features of the material world
and are engaged in the animal propensities of the eat, drink, and be merry type of life are simply wasting their lives by the unseen passing away of valuable years. We should know in perfect consciousness that human life is bestowed upon the conditioned soul to achieve spiritual success, and the easiest possible procedure to attain this end is to chant the holy name of the Lord. In the previous verse, we have discussed this point to a certain extent, and we may further be enlightened on the different types of offenses committed onto the fear of the holy name. Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhu has quoted many passages from authentic scriptures and has ably supported the statements in the matter of offenses at the fear of the holy name. From Vishnu Yamala Tantra, Srila Jiva Goswami has proven that one can be liberated from the effects of all sins simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord. So what else can continue?
Quoting from the Markandeya Purana, Sri Goswami Ji says that one should neither blaspheme the devotee of the Lord nor indulge in hearing others who are engaged in belittling a devotee of the Lord. A devotee should try to restrict the vilifier by cutting out his tongue, and being unable to do so, one should commit suicide rather than hear the blaspheming of the devotee of the Lord. The conclusion is that one should neither hear nor allow vilification of a devotee of the Lord. As far as distinguishing the Lord's holy name from the names of the demigods, the revealed scriptures disclose that all extraordinarily powerful beings are but parts and parcels of the supreme energetic Lord Krishna. Except for the Lord himself, everyone is subordinate. No one is independent of the Lord. Since no one is more powerful than or equal to the energy of the Supreme Lord, no one's name can be as powerful as that of the Lord. By chanting the Lord's holy name, one can derive all the stipulated energies synchronized from all sources. Therefore, one should not equalize the supreme holy name of the Lord with any other name. Brahma, Shiva, or any other powerful god can never be equal to the Supreme Lord Vishnu. The powerful holy name of the Lord can certainly deliver one from sinful effects, but one who desires to utilize this transcendental potency of the holy name of the Lord in one's sinister activities is the most degraded person in the world. Such persons are never excused by the Lord or by any agent of the Lord. One should therefore utilize one's life in glorifying the Lord by all means, without any offense. Such activity of life, even for a moment, is never to be compared to a prolonged life of ignorance, like the lives of the tree and other living entities, who may live for thousands of years without prosecuting spiritual advancement.
Let's read the translation together one time, please. What is the value of a long life which is wasted, inexperienced by years in the world? Better moment of full consciousness, because that is no one start searching after the supreme nature. So I was thinking that on today's Thanksgiving Day will be a good start to kind of remind ourselves for the things we can be grateful for, and it's such a wonderful practice in our devotional life to remember all the blessings that Krishna has given us, and if we are really sincerely thinking, we can actually see that so many things that Krishna has given us we actually do not really deserve. So I'm really grateful for all of your association here this morning, and it's wonderful to have Krishna Kripa Prabhu here this morning. Actually, if it wasn't for Krishna Kripa Prabhu, I wouldn't have been in Krishna consciousness. So it was one day I was in Jacksonville. I was getting my master's from University of North Florida, and I hear some chanting on campus. So I was really surprised because I was used to hearing kirtan in India, but moving here in States I had never had such an experience. So I was like, where am I hearing this chanting from? So I just kind of started like following the sound, and then I see Krishna Kripa Prabhu chanting on the bench by the there's like a green garden area. And so I started talking to Krishna Kripa Prabhu when he was kind enough to tell me about the program that was happening at the University of North Florida. So it's just wonderful that all of the devotees like yourself, and when you go on Harinam, you can touch so many lives. You know, if it wasn't for Krishna Kripa Prabhu chanting that day, you know, I would have still been wasting my life. So, you know, thank you so much, Prabhu, for everything you do. I know is it 5 hours that like you try to 3? Only 3.
My friends in New York are doing 7 for Kartik.
So I'm really grateful for your wonderful service that you do for all of us.
Thank you for being open to benefit by me advice to attend the local programs.
Thank you. So yeah, and it tends to be that we tend to do that actually the opposite a lot of times, right? Where rather than being able to focus on the things that Krishna has given us and to be grateful for, when things are actually not going our way, or we have some struggles, or we have some stumbling blocks, it's like, well, why is this happening to me, right? And we see this wonderful example of Maharaj Parikshit, right? Like, if you see the thing that he did to kind of the punishment he got, there's no proportion to it, right? So in that just one moment, the mistake that he made of putting the dead snake around the neck of the sage, and then, you know, his son giving the curse of dying in 7 days, right? And so there are so many things that Maharaj Parikshit could have done, right? Like, he could have tried to really think of like, why is this, you know, why did this happen to me? And, you know, being angry at Krishna, being upset with Krishna, or trying to see if he could actually turn it around, right? Like going back and apologizing or showing like all the things that he has done in his life that are right and good, and why like this one thing should not have given him the punishment that he got, right? But we actually see from the lives of such wonderful Vaishnavas like him, he takes that opportunity to see like, okay, what should I be doing now, right? I really have just 7 days left. So what is the dharma, what is the duty of a person who is about to leave his body? What should I be focused on? So that's something that we can meditate on, is when it's really hard to be able to get the answer of a question why, when things are not, when, you know, hard things are coming in our life, or quote unquote some test may be coming, or whatever that, you know, challenges may be coming in our life. It's really hard to get the answer of the question why. There can be so many reasons. But one time I was going through some hard time in my life, and I was talking to one of my mentors, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and he was telling me, he's like, there can be multiple reasons of why someone is going through a hard time in their life, but you can always meditate that the purpose is always one, which is bringing you closer to Krishna. And so as long as you focus on that purpose and you can remember that purpose, then it's going through those challenges gives the meaning of it, right? And you can be focused on how they're actually bringing you closer to Krishna, and actually be even grateful for those times, because you can really then, looking back, see how they helped you to grow in your Krishna consciousness and be closer to Krishna. So in this verse, and then also in the purport, one of the things that's focused on is how we should be utilizing our time, right? That's one thing that we have is really limited, right? I was listening to an interview of this really rich person some time ago, and he was telling, it's like, I have I have so much money, and the reason actually I wanted to make money in life is to be able to get freedom. And that's one thing that money is able to get you, is freedom to now where I can choose what I want to do. So I thought, at least, at least from material perspective, he understood the essence of getting wealth, right? A lot of time we see people just kind of going in that circle of making more and more and more. At least from material perspective, he got some intelligence to where he understood the essence of being wealthy is to be able to get freedom to then choose how someone spends their time, right? So he doesn't have to do certain things that he may not want to do with his time. So he was saying, even with like all the money that I have, one thing I cannot buy is time, right? Even with millions of dollars, if I spend the seconds, I cannot buy that back. So this practice he was saying he does is he basically have his calendar completely blocked all the time. And the reason he does that, he's like, if your calendar is open and someone asks you like, hey, are you open at this time and are you willing to do this? You just look and you say yes, like that's your default mode. But if the calendar is blocked or your time is blocked, you're like, oh, it's blocked, let me see what I can do. And it gives you a time to think if you actually really want to do that, or if that's the best thing of your time. So it kind of gives him that pause to do that. And I thought that was a nice practice that he was incorporating. But the point is that realizing how important how important time is, and that's one thing that we cannot get back. Right? So trying to remember that and utilize that in best possible way. And again, we see that so wonderfully in life of Srila Prabhupada, where he didn't even waste like a single second of his life, even till his last breath. Like we just observed his disappearance day. Even till his last breath, he was giving himself, recording lectures, giving instructions, and so he gave his life to serve Krishna, to be able to serve the message of Lord Chaitanya. So that's really the importance of utilizing and understanding how critical time is, and once we lose time, we cannot get it back. And yeah, it's just really nice to see the lives of these wonderful devotees. Again, like I've been fortunate to spend some time with Chaitanya Chan Prabhu when he's visiting West, and being able to get his association. And I can see like there's not like a single second that he wastes. Like even when I'm like taking him from one place to the other in the car, like he's just memorizing shlokas, or he's chanting shlokas in his mind, or he's taking calls with these devotees. So it's just amazing to see like how he's so immersed in serving Krishna. And I was talking to him like this time he was here, and he was telling me that like when we were having some conversation, and he said, yeah, like we should I need to focus a little bit more on my like making sure I'm being a little bit doing some physical activity or something like that. And I was like, Prabhu, why do you say that? Like, and he was saying when the lockdown happened with COVID in 2020, he said I was just writing my like for my books, or the articles online. Like he does a lot of service of writing. And he said I was doing that, and since we were in the lockdown, like the prasadam was being served in our room, we weren't going out, and so I was just like doing my service, taking prasadam. And he said like I realized it has been like 21 days and I have not been outside my room. Like I haven't left my room for 21 days. And I couldn't just fathom that. Like he was so like, how can, like, for me, like an hour, it's like when I'm trying to do service, I'm actually, ticking the clock, all right, like, it's like an hour is done, all right, like, this is what my service was, like now I can go and do whatever material things, that like I have so much still attachment to do. And, here he was like 21 days has passed by, it's like, oh, like I haven't gotten out of my room, it's been like 20 some days. And so, yeah, it's just so wonderful to see, like how carefully and wonderfully like these devotees are using their time in Krishna's service. And so we should be really careful of how we're using our time. And then the verse before this one, the one that you talked about yesterday, focuses on the chanting of the holy name and how anyone and everyone should be chanting the holy name, right? And it talked about, and again mentioned here, is to be careful of not making offenses to the holy name or the devotees who are spreading the holy name, right? To understand how the gravity of it, right? It's Prabhupada is saying in the purport of how you should actually be able to slice the tongue of the person who's making that offense, right? Which is really heavy, and obviously like we wouldn't do that, but
It's really such
yeah, for the time, place, and circumstance, right? But what we can do is we can do three things, right? We can either ask that person, if we are in a situation where we can ask that person to stop and not to do such a thing, we should definitely do that. The second thing is, if we cannot do that, then walk ourselves away from that situation, so we're not engaging in such an activity. And third is just to always remember and make sure that we do not do such a thing, because that's one thing that can really really have the biggest thing that can have like a negative impact on our spiritual life. I was hearing in a lecture where there's like if you make like a certain number of offenses, it gets to a point where you're not even able to chant the holy name, And so I was thinking like how merciful and compassionate Lord Chaitanya is, that he's really giving this holy name, but there's still like things that we can do to where it can get possible that we cannot even chant the name of the Lord once. So we need to be really careful of not committing any offenses, and if it happens unintentionally, and to make sure that we ask for forgiveness from the devotees that we may have committed offenses to. And also to realize like not to take it cheaply, or not to not to just freely seek for forgiveness. Like I've seen this like among certain devotees, is like I'm like before they're even like about to say anything or ask, like I beg everyone's forgiveness for doing certain things or something like that, like where I feel that there's not like thoughtfulness in, rather than trying to do certain thing the right way and making sure not making offenses, to just start with forgiveness, right? It's like, oh, I know like I'm so chillant about doing the service that I know I'm going to make offenses, so I will just ask for forgiveness, rather than trying to do it the right way, right? So just like it's easy for the pendulum to swing one extreme way, so not to go to the other extreme either, but always like be really sincere of the service that is being given to us by mercy of Prabhupada, by mercy of Krishna. It's not, it's just, if you really like see ourselves, it's just it's so amazing that like how in this possible world in America, in the Western world, that somehow Krishna is so kind because of mercy of Prabhupada, that like we are in a place where we have so much association. And it's also Krishna's mercy that we all have probably been in times in places where we did not have such association, right? And so to remember those times and meditate on that gives us the gratitude that we need to have for the association of devotees that we have right now. You know, being in Gainesville, being in Alacho, we're so blessed to have the association of the devotees, and having that so accessible. And also similarly the access to the holy name, right? I mean, and not to take that for granted, right? Like growing up in India, and where spirituality is such a important part of a lot of people's life, I did not have my parents are spiritual, but the path that they were following was kind of more towards like impersonalist path, or path of realizing the super soul. And I always felt like there was something missing. Like, how is that? The path of, or the idea of God not having a form just never resonated with me. There was something I always felt like they would have these, growing up, I would go to the lectures and they'll have these satsangs, and in there they'll talk about how to see God, and you know, basically every time it would be like you see God within you. And you know, being a kid and a teenager, that just never, like, it's like there has to be more. You know, it's like, how do I see God within me? Like, it's not happening, it's not working. It's like so and then, you know, being able to somehow, you know, being able to be able to, as I was talking earlier, like with mercy of devotees, how I was able to get, you know, access to the holy name, and get access to Krishna, and get access to my spiritual master. Like, being able to have that is such a wonderful blessing, you know. And just kind of seeing, again, like, if I'm being really sincere, like, there's really nothing that I've done in my life to be able to deserve that. But it's by the mercy of devotees that somehow I'm able to get access to it, right? Somehow in this life, I'm able to chant the holy name. Somehow I'm able to take darshan of the deities. And so I would, this is, it's last 5 days of Kartik, starting from today with the first Ekadasi, right? The Bhishma Panchak. So, it's really nice to be able to, any vratas or any things that you are following for the month of Kartik, like taking these 5 days and seeing how we can actually go deeper in our spiritual life, or going deeper in our service, and how we can try to do that. One beautiful way is the festival of Holy Name is happening in Alacho starting tomorrow, so we all can take shelter of the devotees and take shelter of the Holy Name, and again see like how blessed we are to be able to have such a wonderful environment where we can chant so nicely, and do kirtan with one another. So I would highly encourage everyone to try to focus, as again the verse was saying, to at least for, not for the whole life, at least to have that focus for next 5 days. Is like, hey, I'll be really conscious of how I'm spending my time, and how I can try to give more time in my spiritual practice, and try to spend more time doing kirtan and glorifying Krishna's name. Thank you, Prabhu. Any comments or questions or anything anyone would like to share?
Question for you, Prabhu. You were talking earlier about offending Vaishnavas, getting forgiveness from Vaishnavas. So in Bhagavatam, somewhere in Prabhupada's purports, he talks about how one of the characteristics of a devotee is that they're very forgiving. So that if you offend a Vaishnava, or you offend a devotee, and then you ask for forgiveness from them, and they don't forgive you, does that mean they're not a real devotee? They're not a real Vaishnava?
That's what we call the
So I can speak at least a little bit from my personal life and try to answer that question. It has happened where like I have committed some offenses and I'll ask for forgiveness to that person. And Krishna's devotees are so kind that like I would get back is like, oh Prabhu, really? Like I didn't even realize that that happened. I didn't, so a lot of times they're not even like taking that as an offense. It's just like the devotees are so kind and so merciful that they're not even seeing that. But then also at times it happens that we have made such a big offense that it will take time for someone to be able to forgive us. Doesn't really mean that that person is less or more of a Vaishnava. I think the focus should be more of like the whole point is like we are trying to do this so that way we can cultivate our relationship and get closer to Krishna and serve his devotees nicely. And that's the focus. And if I'm asking for forgiveness and if I'm not getting forgiveness, if I'm turning the mirror on the other side, it's like, oh, maybe that person is actually not really a Vaishnava, or that person is not really a devotee if he's not forgiving me, then was that apology really sincere, right? And so if the apology is really sincere and the person decides not to forgive us, we should again like focus on, oh, like I actually made such a big offense that it's taking like it will take some time for this person to forgive me. And also then to be careful in our attitude, like I cannot do this, I cannot take the devotees for granted, and I cannot take my spiritual life for granted to not make an offense like that. So I would that would be kind of my suggestion, to kind of focus it in that manner rather than seeing, because again it's really like there's the cliche of like whenever you point one finger at someone you have three pointing back at you, right? So it's really easy to do that and see the gaps or the faults of others, right? But it's hard to do that for ourselves. But again, it's if we are sincere, it's we can easily see that. So I hope that answers the question. Yes, ma'am.
I have two thoughts on that also. One is that like another person's spiritual advancement is none of our business. Our only business, our only concern is our spiritual advancement. So
Good point.
we should keep that our focus, not even worry about where another person is at. And on top of that, every single person is trying, like if we're here, we're really trying to love Krishna and we're trying to stick to the process. And so if I make an offense to somebody, then that could potentially make them not want to be here in the association of devotees. So whether they're advanced or not is not the point. It's like, am I somehow or other leaving a bad taste in their mouth with devotees? Am I gonna somehow make it so they don't want to be here anymore? So that's like really heavy, and we should always feel like we should do our part to not let that happen.
Great points. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, over here, please.
I want to take things in an entirely different direction and glorify Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, because I think he's amazing, and I'm very glad that you brought him up. And just like this, and when you discussed his, his lila, right, of being in the room isolated, having prasadam every day, but quarantine times, right, and he's just like writing and writing for 20 days, and he's like, oh, maybe I should get some exercise, right, and so the way I kind of interpret that, or my insight, if I can presume to have such insight into his mind, is that he's having fun. When in my experience of Chaitanya Charan, there are some things that he clearly really likes. He likes Star Wars. He likes drawing diagrams, and he likes doing these clever wordplay things, you know, like, oh, you know, you instead of upgrading your standard of living, you should seek to upgrade your standard of longing, right? He really likes that stuff. Yeah. And when he's focusing on all of that, and he likes teaching, right? And when he's focusing on all of that, it's just very apparent that he's having fun. And he probably feels that he is very fortunate that he's been able to find this service of writing about, you know, Bhagavad Gita and these amazing texts, and utilizing, you know, not only making, you know, interesting pop culture comparisons sometimes, but if you read his books, right, he has these diagrams, and then he likes, you know, he makes these really cool, interesting, clever formulations that stick in your head, right? He's really having fun. And so, yeah, if I think about like, okay, well, you know, if he's in this room for 20 days just reading and writing, it's not like anyone is saying like, oh, if you don't stay in your room for 20 days and write this many books, then you're in trouble, or you're not going to get prasadam, right? He's probably having the time of his life. And for me, the lesson is that, like, you know, and not all of us are going to find that fun, right? Like I could potentially sit in a room and write for 20 days, but only if I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. So we kind of have to find that thing that makes life feel like play and connect it to Krishna, because Krishna is the supremely playful being. And that aspect of him is also in us, and that is what kind of can make time disappear and make service really feel so absorbing and make other people go, wow, like you have such dedication. It's like, no, it's not dedication, I'm just having fun.
Thank you. Yeah, we all have certain inclinations, and so if we are able to use that in Krishna's service, then we can have that fun and reciprocation to where we continue to enjoy and do that. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was wondering if you can give some very 1, 2, 3 ABC practical example of taking shelter of the holy name. What does that look like?
I can probably think of some things, but I think Krishna Kripa Prabhu, you probably would be able to answer that way better than I would.
Well, I think different people take shelter of the holy name differently. In my life, I try to chant my 16 rounds first thing in the day before anything else, feeling that these 16 rounds are going to empower me to be Krishna conscious, that I'm supposed to be doing everything for Krishna. If I chant 16 rounds in the morning, I'll remember that, and I'll be able to act in that devotional consciousness. And then try to do the 16 rounds very attentively, because we didn't mention yesterday, but one of the 10 offenses is to chant inattentively. And in Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, even if we don't commit the other 10 offenses, we still won't get Krishna Prema if we chant inattentively. But if we chant attentively, even though we may be habituated to commit the other offenses, we'll become so purified by that focused chanting that we'll stop committing the offenses and we will attain Krishna Prema. So by that analysis, the inattention to the holy name is the biggest offense, actually, because it's the root of all offenses. So those are just a few thoughts.
Yeah, I think one thing, actually Amrita Kelly and I were talking about, there were some things that we were planning, and we were focusing on, like, should we do this or should we not do that? And I think what came, the instruction that we got, what came up was like, if we make those certain changes, it will get really busy, and it will be hard for us to kind of be able to chant our japa nicely, or being able to chant in mornings, because the changes will require us to do certain things early in the morning and so on and so forth. So the point I'm trying to make is, as devotees, we should have our things revolve around to where the japa or the chanting is the focus, right? So you plan your day around where the japa is the focus rather than the other way around, right? So as long as you're able to, so that's one practical tip I can share is to kind of have that meditation or have that focus, like, hey, how am I planning my day tomorrow to make sure that I can chant, as Prabhu was saying, attentive rounds. I can say unfortunately for my personal experience, I don't, a lot of times the things that I'm doing, again, it's not an excuse, but there are times when I'm not able to chant 16 rounds attentively and I'm doing that, but I have what I try to do is make sure that I chant at least I have 6 rounds that should be attentively, right? So at least have some goal that obviously the standard is to make sure you chant all your rounds attentively, and again, what I'm sharing is to not see that as a standard or as an exception or anything like that, but at least to be able to, if you're not, for whatever reason, I know devotees who have really hard lives, or they're serving as doctors and surgeons, and they have 16, 18 hours shifts and whatnot. They even have if they're seeing if they are able to chant their 16 hours attentively, I should definitely be able to do that. But even for whatever reason, if there are whatever ways, for whatever reason, you cannot have at least certain number of rounds that you chant attentively, if not all 16, but have 6 or 8 rounds that that you wake up and chant in the morning nicely and attentively. Those are a couple practical tips. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, some practical things. I feel like the best chanting and reading I've had when I've done a lot of preaching. So whenever, in any way or forms, we can intentionally have that intention that I want to serve Prabhupada's mission. If we have that, it actually helps our personal sadhana. And then it's kind of just, they both feed each other really. The more attentive we are, the more we want to share, the more we're fired up for sharing, and the more we share Krishna consciousness. And it can be in different ways, of course. It'll be different for everybody. The more we do that with all our heart, the more our chanting actually gets uplifted as well. So I think I heard one time how it was some I can't remember the point now, but there was a class and this devotee was making a point between how book distribution or preaching, it's it's in Lord Chaitanya's pastime, but it's connected with the intimate pastime of Rasa Lila with Krishna also. So they connect. I forget the main point, but it's how there's the intimate pastimes with Krishna and Rasa Lila, and then there's the Lord Chaitanya going out and sharing Krishna's names with everybody. But they're both, in a sense, they're one and same. One might look more intimate, one might look more public, but actually. So it's the japa and the sankirtan, the harinas like that. Japa is our intimate time with Krishna, but it's connected with going out and sharing Krishna with others. So whatever shape, form it might take, especially when some people are busy with work and working, then you can give $1 a day to Krishna House. That's or the preaching or whatever else. There's so many things, little things people can do for preaching. And I had one more point about the previous thing about the offenses to the devotees. You can cut the tongue, and you can do it by defeating them in argument also. That's one way actually. And then also one practical thing one can do is that one can actually start glorifying the person who's being criticized, but this devotee does this and this and this and so forth. So in that sense, you are cutting their tongue because they're stopping their vilification against this other devotee.
Thank you. Yeah, on the first one actually, that reminded me of, there was so earlier this year, last year, His Holiness Sachinanda Swami Maharaj was here, and he was giving a talk about the holy name, and he gave one example of, I don't know if any one of you has seen those hand pumps in India. like where you're trying to get there's one actually in Alacho temple also. So the way you pump them is you actually first have to pour some water, and then again I don't understand the mechanics and the physics, but you have to first pour some water, and then you pump it, and then the water from the ground comes up. So Maharaj was sharing how like when you chant the holy name, you should first do that little bit of the watering of the pump, which is trying to, and kind of that reminded me of the point that you were sharing, Shri Sagar Prabhu, was that do things that like really inspire you in your Krishna consciousness, right? Like, and that's different for all of us. Like that may be like listening to some lecture that really inspire us, or reading something, or seeing the deities first, or doing a little bit of there may be like a kirtan melody that we chant, and then we feel really close to Krishna. So whatever that, rather than just directly going to the beat bag and saying, oh, I have to chant my 16 rounds, right? Rather than kind of having that mood to first kind of use that water, that pump with the thing that will inspire us, that hey, I want to chant my rounds, right? So how that can switch. So another question for
you. Another question for you is, while we're in the ashram, it's a requirement that we chant our rounds every day, but in general life, work schedules and family and all this and that. So let's say one is able to devote a particular amount of time per day to chanting, let's say 2 hours a day they can commit to chanting. Is it more important to chant your 16 rounds, or is it more important that you chant good quality rounds, even if it means you don't get to 16?
It's funny, this question comes up so many times. I mean, I've heard, the answer is both. If you're chanting good rounds, you'll be able to chant nicely 16 rounds. I mean, if you're spending 2 hours and you're trying to chant good rounds, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to chant good 16 rounds in 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, there's a reason, like Prabhupada said, like 16 rounds but no less, because I think there's a certain amount of time, minimum time, that we need to spend every day to make sure, because it's like there's the opposite force of Maya acting on us, and then we're trying to counteract that, right? So there's like a minimum, if there's like a force coming from this side, you need at least like a minimum counter force to not go in the other direction, right? So I think that's how I see like Prabhupada saying like, hey, that's at least the minimum counter force that you need to make sure that you don't go in that back direction, right? Now, when we try to do more and more, we can kind of push and make headway, but at least that 16 rounds keeps us, make sure that we at least stay at the position where we are in and don't lose that, right? So always make sure that we don't go any lower than that. And then, yes, like all of those rounds, more rounds, however we can chant nicely is important, because again, you'll be able to see, right? Like in your life, if again, we're being sincere and honest, you'll be able to see like, hey, if I'm chanting and I'm not seeing reciprocation from Krishna, or I'm not making any, making spiritual advancements, or, things like that, you'll be able to see actually, there's something that I'm not doing right. And a lot of times it's like, oh, I'm actually not chanting my japa nicely. Like, so many times I can say from my personal life, like it has happened, and it will come down to like, oh, it's because I'm not chanting my japa nicely. Like so many things will happen in my life, and then I'll be like, oh, like why is this not going on? What's this not going on? And then every time I come back to, it's like, oh, duh, it's because like I'm not chanting my japa nicely. It's like, how many times does it need to happen in my life for me to remember like that needs to be my focus? But Krishna is so kind that he'll still remind me, even though like I need so many reminders.
My response is to question the initial premises of the question. So in what situations are you really only gonna have 2 hours to chant? Like that is ironclad, right? Someone is standing there with a stopwatch, and if you go past 2 hours, then something really bad happens to you, right? Like time is like fungible in a way. If it's like you go out, you're doing 2 hours and you're chanting and it's really good, and then 2 hours goes by and you're like, oh man, I still have a few more rounds to chant. Like you can make time. So like so you might say like, okay, well, generally speaking, I have about 2 hours to spend on chanting every day. But like, keep in mind that like, unless there is some kind of really extreme situation, like you're in the military or something like that, and it's, you're like, you're like Bhakti Hugo, you're on a submarine, I don't know, but like, there's probably some give and take, and you can kind of prioritize, if you want to prioritize your chanting, you can find that flexibility in your schedule.
Thank you. Yeah, and one thing there's this one thing that I can share again from personal life that I was doing, and I was like, why am I, like, how can I be such an idiot? So like it happens like sometimes you're chanting and I don't know, like for whatever reason you stop chanting, and I would, put my beads out of my bead bag, right, to like know where I've left. And I'm like, really? Like, I may have chanted half a round or 3/4 round. That's like 4 minutes. Like, am I really, like, all the other things that I can take time for? Like, I cannot just like start my round again and give that 4 minutes to Krishna? Like how, like ungrateful I'm being for all the things that Krishna's giving me, that like, I'm like, oh, I gotta start really where I left because, I gotta make sure I cannot chant even one extra mantra. It's like, like, how can I be such an idiot? So yeah, there are things that we do like that. It's just because it becomes habit. And then, thankfully sometimes like Krishna just like gives that awakening, is like, come on, like you can do better than this. So yes, bro.
So the Festival of the Holy Name is coming up, right? So how does one take shelter in kirtan? What does that look like? We talked about like arranging our day in such a way that everything that we do revolves around our japa. But we're going to be sitting in kirtan for a few hours, right? Like, what is the intention? What is the approach that is going to lead to us taking shelter of the Holy Name during these hours of kirtan?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I can share from like my personal experience that I feel like have been helpful is when I sit in kirtan, first like praying to Krishna to help me to be able to take the shelter of Holy Name and see how the Holy Name is indifferent from you, right? How I can be able to experience Krishna, you and your Holy Name, to somehow just like help me to be able to do that. And then again, like sincerely trying to chant every mantra, when we're doing, even in kirtan. And I said, because again, the mind it's a little bit easier, at least for me, like to be able to focus the mind in kirtan rather than in japa, because you have the music and everyone else is chanting around you. But even when the mind kind of wanders on certain things, just kind of bringing it back and trying to have that mood. And again, just the third is, I think, for me, the most important thing is just like having the gratitude, right? It's like not taking it for granted that like somehow like I'm blessed to be able to be in the association of all these devotees who are chanting, and somehow like last night I was there at the temple, and when I got in, it was just like such nice kirtan going on, and the curtains open for the deities for the night darshan, and it's like there's no way like I can experience this kirtan, and there's no way I can experience this joy if it wasn't for these devotees chanting over here, right? And so always trying to remember that it's Krishna and the Holy Name is only accessible through their devotees, through his devotees. And always trying to, if we remember that and we try to serve, Krishna's devotees, then we can take the shelter of Holy Name. So I think that's one thing that has always helped me, is like seeing how Krishna and Holy Name is only accessible to the devotees. And that has happened so many times. Like, even if you can be in the holiest place, like think, like there are times like you can, and it has happened in my life, like where I would be at the temple or I would be in Vrindavan, but like I don't have the association of the devotees. It wouldn't feel the same, right? You wouldn't have that inspiration that you would have when you're visiting the Dham and you have the devotees around you. So it makes you realize that actually all of these things are only accessible by the mercy of the devotees. And so when we try to cultivate that mood, then we can take shelter of Holy Name and we can take shelter of Krishna. Yes, Guru.
Hare Krishna. I really like all these topics, gratitude and making amends and chanting the holy names. But I would say, as far as that understand what shelter is. It's, I think, even more understood in its absence. If we didn't have shelter, we would be vulnerable, and that we also depend on shelter, and it's a base necessity. So if I'm making my meditation life a necessity, then I feel like it's going to be beneficial in my life. And then the other things, one of my favorite sayings is that you can't be grateful and hateful at the same time, and that there's always like a really pretty elementary exercise of creating a gratitude list. And every time I do one, it just flips my consciousness, just like a switch, And especially, I like how you had said, especially the things that are only there because Krishna allowed them to be. Those are things like I'm still alive and I'm still free, And then, that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that reminds me of one thing is like taking shelter really means like, right, if it's like we're in here, right, but it's like when it's like raining outside or if it's too cold, it's like even you feel more like, hey, I want to be inside and I want to take shelter of something, right? And so we have been able to do that and take shelter of holy names when especially we have like hard things going in our life, right? But we don't have to pray like Queen Kunti and ask for those because they will come either way. So we don't try to imitate these great Vaishnavas. But what we can do is we can try to again remind of like how many Krishna, like how many years of my life I've really wasted, like sincerely, of again trying to be sincere and seeing like but here I have these few hours to really be able to glorify you through your name. So help me to be able to do that, right? Like so that like seeing the essence, the importance of time, that can also help us to take shelter.
A couple comments. One says in the Chaitanya Bhagavat that chanting congregationally, singing kirtan is 3 times more potent than japa. But also in the Nectar of Instruction, it talks about over-endeavoring for mundane things which are very difficult to obtain. My spiritual master says about that is that if you don't have enough time to chant your rounds, then you're over-endeavoring.
Prasade Govinde